Welcome back to my animal education series. Today we're here with Sam at the National Tiger Sanctuary. Hello.
How you doing?
I'm doing good. Doing good. And who do we have back here?
So this is the biggest cat on our sanctuary. This is Harry, one of our tigers that lives here at the sanctuary.
And do you know what kind of tiger it is? Like a species or?
We are unsure officially just because we do not do genetic testing on our facility. Because we are a non-breeding organization, we essentially don't necessarily need to know what our cats are necessarily. But with Big Harry, if he were to come up here, we'll see if we can convince him to come up and see us here. And again, you will notice when we see our other tigers on the sanctuary, he does look significantly different. He's a much larger cat. He's much bulkier with a large front end. Those characteristics are typically seen within the Amur subspecies, or the commonly known as the Siberian subspecies of tiger. But again, without knowing that, without doing a genetic test, we have no way of knowing for sure.
Just kind of guessing at this point. So, assuming that he is a Siberian, and where would he be found?
So the Siberian or the Amur tiger is found within the northern range of the Asiatic continent, so they're found within the northern part of China up into the Siberian desert, obviously. So they're obviously a very stout animal. They are designed to be surviving in very harsh conditions, and so that's why you do see the evolutionary differentiation of them becoming very large. The Amur tiger is the largest natural subspecies of big cat in the world, so they're going to range within that 600-pound range for the males, so they are much, much larger than the other subspecies of tigers that you see.
And when he came back here, it's absolutely a huge animal.
Yep.
Okay. So how did Harry come to the sanctuary?
So Harry's actually been with us since he was about 1.5 years old. So we've had him for a good portion of his life. Harry's about 7 years old today, so he's lived with us for quite a while. Harry and who we commonly refer to as his brother Cora. They're not technically related, but they actually lived together for about 5.5 years in the same habitat. They actually came from what we refer to, so they started their lives in what we refer to as pay-to-play. Pay-to-play are the organizations that are allowing the public to interact with, to handle, and bottle feed typically young cubs to handle the young animals. It is one of the problems, one of the bigger problems we deal with, because as what humans always look at is we look at what we know, and what we know is holding puppies and kittens. There's no problem with that at all, so why is there an issue with holding a tiger cub? Well, the whole issue with that is Harry obviously gets a little bigger than a puppy and a kitten ever will. And that happens a little faster than people typically expect it does. So because of that, there is a very short window that it is legal to handle these animals, about 8 to 12 weeks of their life. Now within that, obviously an 8-week-old tiger cub, they're not necessarily always the most social, and they don't want to be interacted with, so it is very common to see these animals taken at a much younger age, taken from their mother, that is. It is likely Harry was probably taken from his mom at about 2 weeks of age. Now why this drives such a problem is tigers can live with their mom for up to 2 years in the wild. So taking them at that young an age, we're seeing a lot of issues with their health. They're not developing into healthy animals to start with, and then they're being exposed to the germs, bacteria, viruses that humans carry. And unfortunately, the result of that right now is we're seeing about an 80 to 90% mortality rate in animals utilizing the system. Now, Harry and Cora obviously survived, which we're very, very happy about. But following being in pay-to-play, they actually, prior to coming to our sanctuary, they went to a for-profit zoo. Now, it's what happened at that zoo prior to them coming to us that we're still dealing with Harry to a bit today. Harry and Cora lived in the same enclosure, which they did at our sanctuary for about 5 years. The difference is when we fed Harry and Cora when they lived together, we separated them. They were always physically separated. Prior to coming to the sanctuary, they were basically being made to fight for food every day. And what that drove in Harry is a mentality that if I don't fight, I don't eat today. And so Harry has historically been one of our most food aggressive cats, one of our more food dominant cats, and it's something that we've had to work with him since his arrival, and it's actually the reason why Harry and Cora don't live together anymore. On top of that, they're both very large tigers. We knew they'd want space eventually, so we decided to separate them. But since the separation, we have seen Harry calm down quite a lot. Considering the fact that I have chicken at my feet right now, and Harry's not right behind me trying to get that chicken, shows a lot that he's come a long way to understand that, you know, I'm always going to have food. I don't have to fight, and that's a very, very beneficial thing to see with him.
Is that a common issue that you see in a lot of tigers or big cats in general?
Not every big cat. It's typically when we see the high food aggression, the high food dominance, and food anxiety, a lot of and it can happen with any animal. Each animal is a little different. But a lot of times that is relating to previous experience, that's relating to something that has happened to them earlier in their life that has caused that to develop. So with Harry, it was having to fight for food at a young age, so he developed that high aggression to ensure he got food. We have other cats that were just not fed well, and so anxiety comes into play, and so when they see food, it gets very worked up because I might not eat tomorrow, and so it's something we have to really work on. But that's something we work towards to eliminate with the cats. We feed our cats 6 days a week every day, and that's twofold why we do that. Number one, it allows us to help deter some of that food aggression. When they start realizing that food is going to be there every day, it allows them to start decreasing that overall food aggression. But on top of that, it actually allows us to understand how each one's doing, because at the end of the day, a large carnivore like Harry here doesn't really show he's injured or sick or doesn't feel well. They hide it very well. And so the ways we have to identify that is through different metrics, and one of the best metrics is food. If I ever see Harry's not eating for a day, it's telling me there's something going on with him, because Harry likes to eat a lot. So
Because like wild animals, if they show any type of weakness, that's like bad for them in their survival.
exactly.
So it's kind of like the same thing. If they try to show weakness here, they don't want to do that. So
Nope.
it's hard for you guys and other like animal caretakers to identify what's wrong with the animal.
Oh yeah, and so that's something I'm sure that in your previous videos and previous interactions with other caretakers, what they would probably tell you is that the only way to take care of these animals is really to get to know them, because you can't come in and say Harry and Cora are both tigers, so I'm going to treat them the same way, because they all have their own personality. They are all very, very unique, and so we have to identify and create specific care programs for each animal to ensure we are doing our due diligence to care for that animal in the way they need to be cared for.
So back to these tigers in the wild, what do they eat?
So tigers, obviously, as large as they are, once again, like our leopards on the sanctuary, they are going to be a very opportunist animal. So where we commonly perceive them as a large predator, they still will steal prey from other animals. So if they have an opportunity to take something and not have to hunt it themselves, they will. They will eat carrion as well, so they will eat previously dead animals. But when they're hunting, these guys are going to be targeting the larger animals. So they're going to be going after the large hooved animals, whether it be swine, some form of pig, or large hooved deer. Relative to deer, that's going to be what they're actively hunting naturally, and that's where again, kind of going into our feeding situation, that's where it's differing, because they're hunting a large game. They will kind of gorge themselves and then be satiated for several days, up to a week, and then they kind of repeat that project. We feed a smaller amount every day, again, to help us identify issues, and so we do feed differently than how they'd eat in the wild, but we feel it's the best method for them here.
Because like as you mentioned, like if they aren't eating, that's how you know something's wrong.
Yep.
So more consistent feeding schedules that you're gonna definitely know.
Yep, it gives us kind of heads up so we can catch issues earlier on with them.
And how does the coloration help them in the wild?
So again, with all big cats, what you're going to see is they're going to have some form of natural patterning at some point in their life. That even extends to lions. So lions, when they're born, they do have spots, and that's something a lot of people don't know. But it's such an excellent camouflage method. Now with your tigers, they're obviously the ones that carry that stripe patterning, and that's a very unique characteristic to them. And again, what that serves as is purely a method of breaking up their silhouette. What that allows for is when they're hiding in grass or when they're hiding in the tall trees, it's not just a solid shape. It's a variation, and it allows them to break up that silhouette and allows them to hide very, very well. Now, coloration with these animals, it is going to vary very, very heavily, from the very, very dark orange, very, very vibrant colored animals to a cat that looks like Harry, who is a little more muted. Harry has a lighter coloration in his fur, and then we can extend into our white tigers as well. So we have a very wide variety of fur colorations, but the big thing to remember with our animals is most animals don't have the same color or spectrum vision that we have. A lot of them have a much more muted variation in their color vision, but their ability to see in low light conditions is much higher than ours. And so where we can easily identify that Harry is a white tiger and the guy next to him down there, Harry is an orange tiger and Dakar is a white tiger, it's not going to be as easily identified with each animal, different animals in the animal kingdom, because their vision is different than ours as a whole. So as far as the coloration, that's not as big of a camouflage method as much as those stripes are as a whole.
And how many tigers do you have on the property?
So right now we have 24 tigers that live on the sanctuary with us today. We have 19 white tigers and 5 orange tigers.
And you before mentioned the white tigers. So what is the main difference between like an orange, like normal tiger and the white tigers?
So the white tigers are it is actually the only subspecies that trait was ever found in is within the Bengal tiger, so the cat that is naturally found in India. It is purely a fur coloration. So it is a genetic trait that is changing the amount of melanin that is found within that fur coloration. It also changes the color of their eyes, and that they will have blue eyes. It's a very rare trait. So the last time that we recorded seeing one of these animals in the wild was in the 1950s. It didn't happen real frequently, very frequently to start with. It's, again, very similar to think about red hair in humans. It's not happening real commonly. But at the same time, with how pretty the white tigers are, they were hunted and removed from the wild at a very high rate, to the point where this trait is actually functionally extinct in the wild. It is very unlikely you will ever see another wild white tiger. However, our sanctuary is a great cross-section of captivity, and that you're seeing 24 tigers, 19 of them are white. So we have a very high number of white tigers.
And then the majority of tigers are white tigers.
Now, unfortunately, the reason you see that is they're actually not that hard to breed. So if you breed a white tiger with a white tiger, you end up with a full litter of white tigers. What that results in, however, is unfortunately, because especially how rare they were early on, people learn that inbreeding is a very effective way to create as many of these white tigers as possible. So unfortunately, what that means is today, when you see white tigers in captivity, you are typically seeing some genetic issues coming along with them. Cross-eyedness is a very common trait. Seeing cleft palates is another one. This is also why you very rarely see white tigers in zoos, and that's because within high-quality accredited zoos, they can't breed white tigers, and obviously within zoos they participate in the species survival program. So they're going to concentrate on having animals healthy animals that they can breed and continue that species survival program. Where unfortunately, due to the genetic health problems in these white tigers, they are no longer able to be bred within that healthy organization. So.
And you mentioned they're functionally extinct in the wild. Most likely, a bright white tiger is not going to blend in as well in the rainforest.
That's a common thought. So a lot of people bring that up, is that white tigers, again, would not blend in very well.
They do have stripes.
They do have stripes, and that's the big thing. Because with them, again, as I mentioned, the color variation isn't as big a deal. Because, again, most animals are not seen in the same light spectrum as we do. So they're not light spectrum, but general spectrum as we do. And so because of that, just the coloration isn't as big a deal. But again, going back to evolution, if we think about evolution, if a trait doesn't work, it doesn't exist. It will not continue on, because there will no way of that trait being propagated onto the next generation. What they really look like, what's really cool, is to actually see them laying down in the trees, because what I've always perceived them to look like is light coming through the trees. When it hits the ground, they look like that kind of spectrum laying on the ground, and so they actually blend in a lot better than you would expect them to. Now, obviously, I think a dark orange tiger is going to blend in way better, but they do a pretty decent job. I don't think that was necessarily as big a factor as why you don't see them in the wild anymore.
And here we have an example of a white tiger. And who is this guy?
So this is Dakar. Dakar is one of 17 white tigers we rescued from the circus industry back in 2017. And so him and his brother, who lives next door, came back in May of 2017.
And what kind of conditions do these animals live in the circuses?
Unfortunately, it's pretty rough typically. So within the circus industry, what a lot of people, the misconception or a lot of questions I get is, what circus did they come from? Where did they come from? Well, it wasn't a particular circus. It was actually basically a leasing company. So within the circus industry, you have to think, when they're not performing with their animals, they don't necessarily want to spend the money to take care of them. So essentially, they're renting them during that season. Now, within that type of organization, where they're really making a lot of money is actually the breeding and selling, or breeding and obviously propagation of being able to produce more and more performing cats. So the young, healthy animals, they're the ones that are typically having a little bit better living conditions, because they're breeding cats. They're the ones that make their money. Where it's their older cats, the ones that are past their prime breeding age, that's where they're put in the shows. Within that organization, you're going to see cats obviously on the road constantly, which is not good for them to start with. Cats don't like moving. They like being in kind of their place, and that's where they like to be. But you're going to see 3 to 4 cats in roll cages at a time. You're going to see very poor living conditions. And so unfortunately, a lot of times when we bring a cat in the case of Dakar or these circus animals, we do have to not only overcome a lot of the abuse and the neglect that they've occurred, a lot of times these cats really haven't got to live on natural surfaces or seen the sky or dealt with weather, and so that can be a lot of transition to make early on.
And we noticed that he's kind of looking at Harry over there. Is that something you guys are looking for?
Yep, so with our cats, we do pay very close attention to who lives next to who, obviously, because not every cat likes every other animal. Dakar, what we've noticed since moving next to Harry is he does pay a lot of attention to Harry. Harry is our biggest cat. Harry is by far the most dominant animal on our sanctuary. Dakar likes to think he is up there with him, but Harry, as you can probably, it's hard to tell, but he's not paying any attention to Dakar at all, where Dakar likes to really pay attention to him. We haven't seen anything to drive us to the point where us moving these guys yet, but it is something we are paying a lot of attention to at this point.
Well, thank you so much for telling us about these tigers.
Not a problem.
And educating me on the white tigers, because I didn't know a whole lot about this.
Yeah.
And as always, I hope you guys enjoyed this week's episode. Don't forget to leave a big thumbs up down below, subscribe to my channel, and also check out my Instagram at @ColeShirk. And as always, I'll see you next week.